Welcome to the Joyful Nourishment Podcast. This is a podcast about our relationship with food and eating, body image, eating disorder recovery, mental health, and more. I am your host, Lynn Thorstenson, a registered nutrition therapist and body image coach based in the west of Ireland. And I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome back to another episode of the Joyful Nourishment Podcast. And I suppose I'm very excited about this conversation, hopefully to unfold with my guest today, which is Dr. Miguel Toribio-Mateas, who is known affectionately as the creative scientist. And he is, I would say, multifaceted, creative, intellectual, academic, clinical, with personal lived experience, but that wasn't really in your bio. So I will go to what you shared with me. So Miguel is a distinguished clinical neuroscientist and nutrition researcher in the UK. And his expertise centers around the intricate gut-brain connection, drawing on a rich real-world scientific foundation rather than purely academic pursuits. Dr. Miguel's academic journey includes degrees in nutritional medicine, clinical neuroscience, and culminating in a doctorate focused on mental health and the gut microbiome. And his doctoral studies coincided with a 5-year research innovation fellowship funded by the European Regional Development Fund, where he explored the profound effects of gut health on mood, cognition, and overall well-being. And I'm hoping that those are areas that we're going to get into and talk about. But your other experience and your lived experience is in having navigated personal challenges with ADHD, autism, and a history of disordered eating. So Dr. Miguel offers a unique perspective on the importance of mindful eating, and his approach is not just about managing dietary needs, but embracing a holistic relationship with food that honors the body and mind. And he advocates for mindful eating as a transformative practice that has been central to overcoming his struggle with food, enabling a healthier and more attuned existence. And also, I know you're writing a book, right? That is coming out in the end of 2024 or early 2025, which is called Thrive with ADHD, that further encapsulates these insights and offering strategies that intertwine gut health, mindful eating, and neurodivergence. And I think that sounds like a much needed resource in the 21st century, because I see a lot of kind of those intersections coming together. And I think where the nutrition, the clinical nutrition work with the mindful eating and the relational aspect of eating, and a lot of people also then experience neurodivergence or neurodiverse, and in our neurodiverse kind of human experience too, and bringing all of these pieces together. I think it's where it's at for me. I think, it can be, we can live in this sort of very binary existence. So I'm very excited to have you here, Miguel, to talk about all these different intersections. So you're very welcome to the Joyful Nourishment Podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here with you.
Yeah, and I mean we have met through other kind of in another lifetime. We had you over to speak at our nutrition therapy conference pre-pandemic in another lifetime.
Yeah.
So, but like I said in my introduction, I know you have a long and rich personal and professional story and background, and I would kind of love to hear, and I know this is probably going to take up a bit of time, to hear kind of about that journey and how you have kind of evolved to where you are now.
Yeah, where do I start? You want the whole journey.
Well, we've got time.
I am Spanish, and so I grew up in Madrid, and I moved to the UK at 21. So I've been here 30 years now, and I guess I'm quite an Anglophile kind of person as well. Like I quite like the whole kind of like English language and Ireland. I love Ireland as well. My first boyfriend was Irish actually, so I have very fond memories of going to Dublin quite a lot many years ago. And yeah, so I guess that's about a time, my early 20s, where I thought that having lived quite intense teens, I had normalized things like taking slimming tablets because I thought, well, they were available in the chemists in Spain. They were supposed to be given with prescription, but you could get them without prescription, and they were full-on amphetamine-like slimming tablets that, made you completely suppress your appetite. And so you didn't eat for hours and hours and hours. So I was happy to have a big of pastry or something in the morning because we love that in Spain, like really big donuts with loads of chocolate on top, or like a slice of cake like that, that is like quite spongy with loads of chocolate on top. And so I would have like
Yummy.
loads of calories and loads of sugar, and then I wouldn't have anything else, until the evening or something, and I would only have like a light dinner and an apple because I wanted to be skinny and I didn't want to overeat. But when I was not taking those tablets, then I would overeat because I actually quite like eating. So it was kind of like going against my natural grain, not eating, because I'm from a family from the south of Spain. Eating is in our culture. It's kind of a part of like sharing and being with people. It's not just having food and nourishing your body. It's more of a cultural thing. So it was against a lot of my DNA, so to speak. But I just got into the habit with, I guess you rub shoulders with people who may not give you the best kind of examples at some point in your
Mm-hmm.
life or another. I did that quite a lot. And so I got this habit of taking this like recreationally and also just during the day. So I would just take these kind of like speed tablets and like not eat. And I did that a lot through probably like until my mid 20s and so on. So it was quite a few years. By then, I was kind of like thinking, okay, well, if I don't have these tablets, then I need to go onto this diet or I need to go onto that diet. And I started getting interested in things like yoga and veganism and, all positive things, but also they have like a double-edged sword because they are like this kind of a double edge. So they can be very positive, but also they can make you quite obsessive. And I got like onto the obsessive end of the spectrum because that's kind of
Okay.
like my tendency as well. I cannot do things like half measure. It has to be full blown. I cannot do just like one sun salutation. It had to be, getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and doing a full on set and then doing like an hour of meditation and blah, 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 and all the rest of it. So I did that a lot and I kind of like cut out in the process. I cut out loads of things because of the eating clean. Before it was eating clean, there
Okay,
was
so
the,
like, yeah, even before like the sort of, I suppose, that really became a trend around what, 2012,
yeah,
13, when we got the
this is the
Instagram to show all this.
90s.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
this is
this is the
before.
90s, but it was going on a lot before then, that if you ate like the gluten, and there was a book going on at the time as well. There was a book that it was Detox. I don't remember the author, but it was Detox Your Life. And it was about basically detoxing your life from toxicity, but also from dairy and gluten and all of this. And I remember I had a friend at the time. This is just 1999, 2000. So it was a bit later. The whole detoxing thing I found fascinating. Oh wow, you can detox. So you can kind of like binge and then you detox. So I got
Mm.
into the cycle of binging and detoxing. And I would be very bingy with things, recreationally. I would like go out and I would go out on a Friday and not come back home until the Monday, and I would party for 3 days in a row. I would not eat a lot during the weekend. I would eat a lot during the week because I was exhausted from like, dancing for hours and hours and, you know, and taking substances and all the rest of it. And then I would not have the best judgment for what I wanted to eat. So I would go and eat like, crap. And then I would feel bad and I would go into an extreme detox and cut out everything. And then reintroduce it because I really fancied, I wouldn't have dairy for like a month, and then I ate a whole I would go to Spain and come back with a cheese, and I would eat a whole manchego cheese in one sitting or something, and, So I used to do a lot of those silly things, more than silly, unhelpful kind of behaviors that just
Yeah.
develop.
And
And
was that how you got into nutrition then? Like through this kind of challenged relationship with food?
in a way, yeah. So I trained to be a yoga teacher in the end. I kind of like exploring the yoga and and going to different retreats and blah blah. I decided, okay, well, I want to go and actually teach yoga. So my idea was, with my ADHD as well, I think like something comes into my mind and it's completely doable. It's gonna happen, and I get excited, and it's gonna happen tomorrow because I have no patience. So it's it has to happen now. So I was gonna basically train, then go and open a retreat center in the south of Spain, and be a fabulous host, receiving people and training them on yoga and all the rest of it. Anyway, it didn't happen. But I did do the training. I did complete my training. It was quite hard, and that's what got me into thinking more about nutrition therapeutically. So that's how I ended up going to university to do nutritional medicine, and and yeah, I think it was a good thing for me to do, but also a lot of people find nutrition for different reasons. They have a journey with nutrition, and there is this tendency in nutrition courses to find people who want to cut things out or who want to experiment with different food groups, and also we are maybe more open to listening to the trends. And it was paleo at the time. Paleo was all the rage. It was just coming into the UK, and people were like quite shocked by it. Oh my God, you don't have grains, and and reducing all the grains. And I completely embraced it as well. I cut out all the grains, and I couldn't have normal potatoes, but I could have a sweet potato, all these things that you do, for fun. So that I went with that, and then kind of embraced the fasting as well. And I couldn't just do like 5 hours between meals. I had to do like 18 hours of fasting, and then maybe do like a full day of not eating, and then even proving myself that I didn't need to drink water as well, because if you fasted and didn't drink water as well, you were stimulating parts of the brain that some guru was talking about. You need to experience thirst as well as hunger for your brain to enter this autophagy properly and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, I did all of that. I think my nutrition course obviously gave me lots of tools, but it also messed me up a lot,
Yeah, I was
because
just going to ask
I
that,
ended
like,
up,
what
yeah.
was that experience of, you know, like how did that impact your relationship with food doing the nutrition training?
Yeah, the nutrition training was kind of like it wasn't the most mainstream course, but it wasn't the most alternative either. It was kind of like in the middle, because it was changing from a provider to another. It was taken up by a university. The university wanted to keep it more mainstream than it had been before. So there was no extreme cutting out food groups and things like that. It was all kind of a human nutrition mainstream kind of science, and I learned about the value of all things, from carbohydrates to fat to, whatever. It was more me experimenting with things in my, on my own,
Hmm.
volition. Yeah, it did actually disrupt my relationship with food even further. Um, like, don't get me wrong, in most cases, I ate what you can call a healthy diet. So, quote unquote, um, I just overate. And I think that's also always been my problem. I think it's always been like, I want more. I think if I go back um, to my childhood and how my mom is with us as well, if I say no to my mom, I've had enough, she gives you an extra bit. It's like my mom is a
Hmm.
bit of a feeder. So she likes to, oh, I've had enough. No, thank you. I don't want any more. And she'll give you two more spoonfuls on your plate. And I think there is that kind of thing that, oh, come on, don't leave that little bit. You just eat it.
Yeah, yeah.
So there is that thing, that I don't like blaming parents, but there is that kind of thing that obviously is there.
Yeah.
And also there's the fact that I like eating. I like eating,
Hmm.
so I don't enjoy not eating. If I didn't put on weight, I'd probably eat a lot more than I eat now, to be quite honest. If I was one of those, I consider lucky people who can eat a lot and they always kind of like thin and fit looking. I'd love that because I love the experience of eating. I love the textures and the smells and the whole food preparation and the enjoyment of eating. But yeah, I just really got into the purging side of things. And I wouldn't purge as in make myself sick, but I would go to things like, oh, I would have enemas to improve my digestion. That didn't need to be improved because I was going to the toilet all the time anyway, because I always had a very IBS-y kind of gut anyway. So it's not like I had a lack of going to the toilet. So, but I was making myself go to the toilet more, taking teas to go to the toilet, like laxative teas, like
Hmm.
Senna teas that are like lethal because they just wake you up at 5 o'clock in the morning and then you need to go to the toilet with an explosion of, motion
Yeah.
going on. So all of that kind of thing, I just got into that, it was a tool that was very normal for me. It was very normalized as part of my life. So I think that replaced the earlier slimming tablets and so on. It was more like a
Mm.
natural because I was a yogi. I couldn't do the chemical suppression of appetite, but I was quite happy to put like herbs in my system to make me go to the loo like 10 times a day. And
Interesting, isn't it? How it's sort of like
yeah.
justified and like at, at this point, like of your journey, like did you, and you just said like it became normalized. Like, did you ever kind of stop and think maybe this isn't really helpful, or maybe my relationship with food isn't what it could be, or what it should be?
Um, it's only been recently. It's only been, so I'm 51 now, and it's only been after I had a massive burnout at 47, and I was so exhausted. I was literally just, chronically fatigued. I haven't quite recovered from that, to be quite honest. It's always been a bit of a struggle since then. But I'm a lot more functional. But I was in a bad way. I had a lot of pain in my body as well. So it was almost like all of these emotions, all of these kind of things that I was doing to my body. I was also all of through this. I was actually just living quite a functional life. I had a job, quite a senior job in scientific publishing. I was traveling a lot. Um, in fact, that was almost like making things worse because I was traveling and I would go to places where I was trying to exclude food groups. And I would land in, I don't know, I did a lot of Eastern Europe and, funny countries in, like Georgia and Armenia and places like that. You couldn't just like get whatever you wanted. It was like a little bit more limited. You land in Georgia at like, 11 at night. It's not exactly like London, like 24 hours a
Hmm.
day. So, and you can get whatever you want. So I would land there and I was like meat free, gluten free, dairy free. And so ideally, I just wanted a salad or something at like 10 o'clock at night after landing. So because there wasn't a salad, I would not eat. So basically, I was just leaving hours and hours and hours of not eating. And I did that a lot because of like travel arrangements. And I was living out of a suitcase basically like 4 days a week. And then I would basically be out Tuesday to Thursday or Tuesday to Friday, most weeks for a long time. Um, so I did kind of like run my body through a lot of stress. And I think then I went on to the academic kind of go back to university, retrain as a neuroscientist because I fancied being a scientist later in life. And then, oh, I just don't want to have a master's. I want to have a doctoral degree as well. So go and do that. And when you do that and you're knocking 50, it's a lot harder than when you're in your 20s. And I just thought, I guess it's my brain. I feel like when I'm onto something, I feel invincible. I feel like, oh my God, I'm so into this. I just need to have the ultimate qualification in it. Like I'm softening in life with loads of things. I'm a lot more self-compassionate, and I think that I stop and think about things a lot more now than I used to do. But I used to just jump onto something and like, oh, I've just
Hmm.
enrolled onto a master's. I've just enrolled into the doctoral degree, and I'm just thinking I haven't even thought about what this involves. It's gonna be 5 years of hell, working and having dogs and having to go to the university, and all of these things that I it was a struggle to actually plan in my head. I just fancied the idea of doing it, and that was more important for me. So anyway, coming back to the burnout, I think that was significant because it made me stop completely. So I had a lot of pain. I was investigating the source of the pain. My sister has got this thing called SAPHO syndrome, which is an autoimmune syndrome that is relatively unknown. So not that many people actually have it in the world. I think there's about 150,000 people worldwide who have it. So it's kind of like a minor autoimmune thing, but it's a combination of autoimmune conditions, including rheumatoid arthritis and arthritic psoriasis, and
Okay.
it's like, so it involves a lot of pain and tissue degeneration and so on. And I thought maybe I've got it. It also has an element of uh, ankylosing spondylitis. So this the joining of the discs in the
Mm.
spine. And that I had a lot of pain in my spine. I'm thinking, oh shit, I'm getting this, and it's gonna be tough. So anyway, I did a lot of investigations, loads of blood tests and MRIs and blah blah whatever with a rheumatologist, and they said, oh, you've got fibromyalgia. It was almost like you haven't got anything else, so it must be fibromyalgia, because that's the way that almost like all fibromyalgia is diagnosed anyway. Uh,
Yeah.
and uh, and at the time, it left me puzzled in a way, but it kind of like made sense from a point of view of thinking, I think this is my body telling me that I need to stop and actually rethink my life. And that's, I think, for the first time in my life that I thought I'm going to allow myself to eat anything that I want, anytime that I want, and just be mindful of how that makes me feel. And then if it makes me feel bad, I'm trying not to eat it again in the same manner or as much as I've eaten. And if it makes me feel good, even if there are things that I have restricted before, like carbohydrates were a big no-no for me for different reasons, because they were not paleo, they were not keto, or they were just too carby, or they were too toxic, or whatever, all this kind of like crap that I had in my brain. And I was gaslighting myself, actually saying to myself, no, of course, all of those things are crap, but I was still believing them. I was
Mm.
still not letting myself have a slice of pizza, or, if I fancied it, or have pasta. Like,
Mm.
or rice. I would go to Spain and my mom would make up gorgeous rice, and oh no, no rice for me. Because, oh, why
Yeah.
are you not eating rice? I'm not eating carbs. And my mom is like looking at me thinking, okay.
Yeah. And the severage of sort of like cultural heritage in that of not even being able to go home to visit family and eat, the food that they're making because of, I suppose, dietary influences of rules. Like it's one thing like when it's genuine, but and I'm curious about that. I mean, you have gone all the way in up to a doctorate degree, and do you think as well, like being in the nutrition industry has sort of made some of this kind of like harder to figure out what's actually legit and what's maybe less legit or actually doesn't really apply in the same way, or maybe doesn't apply to me because with all the trends that we've seen in the last 15, 20 years in the nutrition space.
Yeah, I think you're aware of the you're aware of things that might actually just be more BS, but it doesn't stop you actually following the trend. Like, at one point I was doing these tests in my clinic. It was a blood test. I'm not going to say the name. It's a well-known program. It involved a blood test, and it gave you the results of the blood test. And then, as a practitioner, I uploaded the results from the lab onto a website, and I paid a fee, and then I got like a ready-made program for somebody with like the meals that they needed to eat for like Monday to Sunday. It was basically like a menu with breakfast, lunch, and dinner and snacks. And it was supposed to be based, personalized, completely personalized according to their bloods. Okay, so now I'm thinking, like, how can it be completely personalized? It was, even then, I was thinking, right, so I've got somebody with very similar bloods to somebody else. They almost have the same weight. A lot of people did it because they wanted to lose weight, but not necessarily because it was sold for all kind of things, autoimmunity and skin and aches and pains and whatever. And so you had two very similar profiles, but one had lemon was allowed, but the other one didn't allow lemon. And like somebody had a real issue with that. And or like different types of lettuce, or they could have romaine lettuce, but they couldn't have lamb's lettuce. And I was just thinking, how can it be so granular on the basis of some kind of a pretty basic hematology and a few bits like, lipase or, something. But, it wasn't, even if you could do it, it wasn't like a genetic, epigenetic, kind of like all singing and dancing, looking at a multifactorial kind of set of different biomarkers from your body to figure out what really is appropriate for you or not, if that actually exists. I don't think it does. I think,
Yeah.
your body is so wise. We can be born, we can have babies, we can heal from conditions, but you suddenly cannot have lemon. How does that work?
I know it does make you question things, and I also think like in my own training and early in my career, like, and even within the profession, I think you're right. I think it is like it's easy to kind of, for different reasons, to kind of go in certain things. And then at the same time, we also know that, good nutrition does have an impact, right? This is also a lot of your work looking at, how it impacts the gut microbiome and what we do. But then there's this other piece, the relationship and the relational aspect that we have with food and ourselves and the environment and our maybe, connection to our cultural heritage and those pieces that often feel can be, when we make nutrition so granular into like biochemistry bits or nutrients, that like that whole other piece is just like forgotten about or left out, like conveniently left out. But like we don't eat nutrients unless we're taking supplements, but like they are not enough to sustain us. Like they're supplemental. Like they might be useful, but
Exactly.
they're not like food.
Exactly, and you touched upon the gut microbiome, and I think that's crucial. So there's a perfect example of the post-truth era that we are living in. So if you just go on any database and you search for gut microbiome and diet, one of the key things that comes up is whole grains are kind of essential for the gut microbiome because they have a range of different fibers that are unique to the grains. Anything from beta glucans to um, some arabinins, some very specific types of polysaccharides that are broken down by specific types of bacteria that if you have them in your gut, you will make them thrive. If you don't have them in your gut, they won't thrive as much, even if they can get carbohydrates from other sources. So the argument would be, okay, you can have carbohydrate from broccoli. Okay, it's a lot less carby than pearl barley, for example. And barley is quite interesting because it has very interesting polyphenols in it, as well as polysaccharides. So it's a really interesting grain. But you wouldn't think of cooking barley in like 2024 because, oh, God forbid, it's like full of carbohydrate, and it's a really carby meal and all of this stuff. So it's kind of a, we know, and as a scientist, I've known about that from my first, exposures to the gut microbiome, but still I was not eating grains. I was like, grains were like the devil for me. I was trying not to eat bread. I was trying not to eat like pasta. I think I've only started eating pasta again, apart from like when I was at home with my mom and dad, who my mom did pasta a couple of times a week. I probably only started eating pasta again in the last 4 years. It's not something that I eat because I always thought, oh, pasta is like so indulgent. It's like, who eats pasta? It's like, it's a pointless thing to have because it just makes you put on weight. Why would I eat pasta? Now I love it. I put the whole pantry is full of different types of pasta, and I'll have it like regularly because I'm thinking about it in a different way. And I'm thinking, well, even if I overeat a little bit of pasta, I'm kind of like really enjoying my relationship with the food. So what is more important, the fact that I've got a healthier relationship with the food and maybe 5 extra kilos around my belly, or having a bit fewer kilos around my belly and maybe even fewer kilos than I needed to have because I was too skinny on a lot of periods of my life, far too
Yeah.
skinny for my height. And but have a very strange relationship with food that I wasn't allowing myself to eat that. And I would go to Ibiza and not sleep for a week and take all sorts of things from strangers, and that was fine. But I wouldn't sit down and have a pizza in the evening. When I was starving, I would have a salad. Oh, how can I have a salad? Can I have the sauce on the side? And can I just have extra virgin olive oil, but not like um um what's the vinegar? The as balsamic vinegar. Always because it's too carby. Balsamic vinegar. It's got sugar, so give me like another type. I'm thinking I've just spent like 2 days partying and like taking things from bags from strangers that I don't even know what's in them, but that was fine. But I wouldn't have a risotto or, a lovely seafood paella in Ibiza that they make that is beautiful. I wouldn't allow myself to enjoy the local dishes, and I would have like just like a plain salad because that would be,
Yeah.
so that's the kind of like ridiculousness that I think even my
Yeah.
friends were saying to me, you're so ridiculous. You just like, you're the last one to leave the club. But then you're just like completely obsessed with like no gluten and no dairy and no,
Mm,
nothing. And I was like traveling like with a bag loaded with supplements, and I would do a coffee enema after a club in my room in the hotel. So that was the extent of my
yeah.
ridiculousness with the trying to purge the the badness out of me
I
and
wonder,
not
yeah,
eat.
like just like a different, actually, what you're describing is just a different type of the kind of the diet deprivation binge cycle. It just
Yeah.
happens, see, in this instance, the binge part was the that was the purging and the drug taking, and then the diet part was like, being over controlling about the
Yeah,
food choices
completely.
then.
Yeah, completely. Whereas now I'm kind of like a lot happier to, to be kind of as sober. And I haven't even drank alcohol for the last 2 years. And and having that relationship with food, like I was just saying to you before we started the recording, that I'm not feeling very social media at the moment just because I don't want to put my face on a reel and say hello to everybody on Instagram because I probably feel a bit bigger than I want to be. And it's okay for me to actually look at myself in the mirror and thinking, okay, I probably need to lose like 10 kilos, but I don't necessarily feel super confident to actually go on camera and have like a whole display of,
That might
I
come.
might not do it. Yeah, but I have that kind of feeling, but at the same time, I'm trying to be self-compassionate with myself as opposed to like super critical and say, "Oh my God, you're so fat. Oh my God, you look awful. oh my God, like look at that belly sticking out. Oh my God, you haven't got anything to wear. You're just sticking out, sticking with like super XXL t-shirts just so they are a bit baggy, so I don't feel, uncomfortable going around the house. And I'm thinking, well, actually, it's okay. I feel less the need to control things in my life. And yes, my body's not ideal, like the body that I would want to see in the mirror when I look at myself in the mirror, but a lot of other aspects in my life are actually much better than they have been for many years. So I think I need to look at the whole kind of that balance and keep working on things that are achievable. So I know, for example, and I was telling you about this as well before we started recording, that exercise is crucial for me. And I was never a natural athlete. I'm quite active in general, like, so I wouldn't just like sit down all day. I'm quite fidgety, so I'll move about a lot and I'll go up and down the stairs and all the rest of it. So I move. But when I had this kind of like breakdown of my body and the burnout, one of the things that started getting me out of having to rest a lot and so on was like movement and gentle movements. So walks, for example, walking became really important for me. And then maybe a little bit of weights, but not so much because again, I have this idea of weight training that is maybe not very helpful in my mind. I always think, particularly being gay, I always think of like, the big kind of like gay muscle guys, in the clubs. And it kind of like puts me off a bit, like trying
Hmm.
to even make my body look like that. So I have a funny relationship with weights anyway. I'm better with cardio and with movement than I am with weights. But I'm trying to incorporate a little bit of weights just because, again, I'm 51. Your body needs different things, your
Mm.
spine and your muscles around the spine, and everything needs a little bit more work than before. So I'm trying to do that. And I haven't done that for the last few weeks, and I'm missing it because I have a puppy. He's been a bit demanding, and But again, I'm trying to look at things more globally as opposed to saying, "Oh my God, I'm so stressed because I haven't exercised. I'm feeling so crap because I haven't exercised, and I'm not sleeping properly." And I get into this kind of like negative self-talk. So I'm trying to have a bit more of a reality check and say, "Look, life is messy in general." Um, it is a little bit messier at the moment than I would like it to be, but it's not always going to be as messy as it is now. I'm trying to write a
Yeah.
book. I changed jobs. Well, I left my paid job and I went kind of like freelance again last year. So I've been kind of navigating that space of what do I really want to do. I don't really want to do a lot of the things that I did before. So trying to find that space that makes me feel happy, kind of like work-wise, that allows me to pay my bills,
Mm.
that allows me to be, fit and fabulous. So I'm kind of like navigating all of that at the same
Yeah.
time.
And I think there's also something like I'm a little bit younger than you, but I've also found that, as I moved into my 40s, like my body's kind of changed. And some of the old stuff, like going back like into my teens and 20s of how I experienced my body and what I would like it to look like or feel like you can bring some of those things back up again, but hopefully with some sort of personal work that's been done over the last decade or so, bringing more of that self-acceptance and self-compassion in to be able to, meet those feelings and also to be able to zoom out and kind of look at the bigger picture, like what is, like what's really important here. In the overall context of my life, is it that my body looks a certain way and that's going to put me in in a precarious place with my relationship with food or how I'm thinking? Or is it like that I can be a bit more chill, a bit more flexible? And, my current partner actually lived in Madrid for 12 years. So he loves eating all that kind of Spanish food and more pastas and things that I used to eat because when I trained in nutrition, those were kind of foods like you shouldn't be eating. So they weren't really, they sort of slowly disappeared out. And it's just been kind of interesting to, it's an interesting place to, like what you said earlier, it's like to sort of soften the edges a bit as you, I think, age or, you know, you move into a different part of your life than when you're in your maybe teens, 20s, and even 30s. But there's some kind
Yeah.
of, you know, like, what's the point if you haven't learned anything along the way?
Well, exactly. There is that. There is that. And an example is like I'm going to a festival in August, and in fact, I'm not going to go to the whole day, but the closing act is this band. Well, these two guys called Justice that they do kind of a little bit similar to Daft Punk, kind of electronic music. I really like them, and I've played the album that they did. They did like an intro EP back in 2005 or so, and then their album came out in 2007, and I've been obsessed with them since then. Some of the stuff they've done hasn't been my favorite, but the last album, which has just been released, is amazing. I find that incredible. And the first one is incredible as well. And they also have like some of the songs peppered into the other stuff that they've done in the middle that I haven't quite listened so much to, but they are really good. And I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna go, but I'm not gonna go to the whole day because it kind of like makes me freak out thinking big crowds, like, 20 years ago, I would have been so looking forward to it. And what I would have done several weeks before, I would have gone on to some stupid diet to lose even more weight and to be able to get into some trousers that I bought that were too small for me, or, into a skimpy little vest or something. And I'm thinking, it's funny how I'm not actually getting excited about that. I'm actually getting a bit freaked out about that. I don't want to be in like a skimpy little vest. I don't want to. I want to go to this thing. I want to enjoy it sober. I want to be able to enjoy the music. And the excitement is not about how I'm going to look, how fabulous is it going to be, like to have loads of glitter on my body or something, which is something that it was my trick as well. I always went out, I had loads of glitter on my body. Ridiculous, but I did it. And so it's not so much about that. And it's not so much about how much of my face I'm going to get and how fabulous it's going to get. It's more about the enjoyment of the music. And that is kind of like resonating with the enjoyment of the food as well. It's not so much about this big drama all the time. It's like kind of like day-to-day thing that you need to be happy with.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is, I don't know, is that wisdom of aging, or just like, or just the wisdom at some point it's worth changing perspective, because that was then, but this is now, and that it is, there can be other ways that we get that enjoyment from things, without
Exactly.
having to
Yeah.
make it about what we look like or what other people like, which is that objectification versus this is me showing up in my body to enjoy the experience of the event itself, not about preparing my body to be at an event for other people to enjoy or experience my body as some object for them. If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, that makes sense. It was nice to be an object, I'm happy with it.
No.
I'm not knocking it, but yeah, it's but I don't know, that it's almost like the attraction is gone. It's almost like, you've done it and you close the chapter.
Yeah.
And in a way, I'm glad that with the eating, even though there's always a reminder, it's like these weeks have been difficult for me because I've been eating more because I've been stressed. I had a massive like 3 week period where I had to produce a lot of content for a course that well, I basically overcommitted myself, and I didn't realize that all of the deadlines were kind of like almost one after another, and it just became silly. I had a bit of a dry period, kind of March, April. And then when I had these offers to do stuff with different people, I said yes to everything. And then the deadlines were like one after the next. So I literally spent like 3 weeks doing PowerPoints, like nonstop. It stopped me from exercising because I was like literally at the computer from the morning until the evening. I was quite stressed, and my go-to stress relief is food. So I was eating more. And again, it's not like I was eating donuts in the middle of the day. It's not like I was ordering Domino's and, having a massive, 12-inch pizza to myself. I was having like sardines on toast, but I was having sardines on toast like 3 times a day as opposed to like just once, which is my normal thing. I would have them in the morning with a bit of tamari and I put some wasabi on top. So I have this kind of like trick of, I trick myself from having sushi with the tamari and the wasabi. But I'm not, obviously, because the toast and so on. And so I like the experience of that, but I was just getting quite addictive to that. So I'm thinking, oh, because it's so comforting, then I want to have it 3 times a day. And obviously, there's all the calories and everything else that go with it as well. So it's healthy, but like 3 times a day, it can be a bit excessive. And like for example, bananas are things that I never bought because oh God, my God, bananas are so carby and so sweet. Who
I
wants
must have missed that
bananas?
memo.
Yeah. So bananas were like a no-no. Whereas now I'm obsessed with bananas. Like I really love them. So I would just go through like 5 bananas a day. And I'm thinking, like, there's nothing wrong with bananas, but maybe like 5 a day is a bit much. It's like, maybe one, maybe two, if you really like them, but maybe have more variety. But I was getting quite obsessed with like the same things and a lot of it. And I go through phases like that. At least now I can actually stop after a short spell and look back and realize how that's made me feel. And even though the sardines are healthy, eating them 3 times a day it wasn't making me feel great. So what do I do not to feel like that? Because I don't want to feel either guilty or shameful or just too full. Because in the end, I just end up like, going to bed thinking, I've just eaten too much today. And why have I done that? It wasn't because I was hungry. It was I was bored or I was trying not to be present in what I was doing, and food is taking me away from that. So it helps me dissociate. And and I think having a history of having used, again, when I say drugs, I mean it was recreationally and like, I think my generation who's not had ecstasy, come on, it's like, it's almost like unthinkable. I wasn't like a hardcore drug user, but I think once you've had that experience of disassociating, of like using something to get out of how your body feels and how you feel in yourself, it's quite easy to try and tap into something else to make you feel that way, whether it's
Yeah.
alcohol, and alcohol is so normalized as well. And a lot of people may not have had, ecstasy, but they go to the pub every Friday and they get a bit tipsy. So, and that's their way of disassociating as well. So once you've
Yeah.
had that experience with something that allows you to get out of your body experience and get out of your normal kind of state of mind, if you then have food that is legal and is there in the fridge all the time, and it makes you feel a little bit like that as well, and it's the whole dopamine thing
Yeah.
with food as well. It taps straight into the same receptors as drugs or alcohol.
Absolutely. And I think that there's that, and then there's the flip side of that as well. That's a sort of the detoxing or the restricting or the controlling can also give the
Yeah.
same sort of buzz. But then we have these incredibly wise bodies that don't like to be underfed for long periods of time. So then it sort of swings back. And then it gets, in my experience, it gets difficult then to try to balance that eating that is the dopamine driven, dissociative kind of regulating experience versus the refueling experience that needs to happen if there's also been a long history of deprivation from dieting or restricting or detoxing or even food insecurity. And it's just, it
Exactly.
takes time to, that's the whole journey, I think, to try to figure that out. What does that
Oh
sort of
yeah.
middle space look like?
Yeah, definitely. And I even think further than that and a bit more wider than that as well. It's like, for example, I've been when I started walking and that became like a bit of a lifeline. I got myself a Fitbit, and I was always looking at the Fitbit, looking at the steps. How many steps had I done today? And then I got into the Fitbit extra or whatever. And I thought, oh, the Fitbit extra tells me how many hours I'm going into REM sleep and all of this. And then I got my other half into that as well. And he's a bit like me, only that his body is different. He's bigger and like broader, and but he's done a lot more exercise than me. Like, he's really good with tennis and badminton and skiing and stuff like that. I'm more like, my exercise was dancing. I didn't have any time for any of that. I was busy out on a podium, not to go. I didn't want to be skiing. I wanted to go on a podium in Ibiza. That was my aim. And he got quite obsessed with that as well. And like lately, I stopped wearing it as well. And I'm thinking, I don't want to be controlling what I'm doing to the point that I'm allowing the technology to dictate how many steps I'm doing a day. So to the point that if I haven't quite done the 10,000 steps, I would go up the drive and back to do the 10,000. And I'm thinking, lovely flip side, motivational. It's great that it allows you to motivate yourself. Fantastic. But it's tapping into an obsessive part of me as well that I don't quite like. I don't like feeding that shadow because it is there and it pops back every now and then, and it kind of says, okay. And then I see this shadow popping everywhere in social media and, well, mainstream media with the friggin' ultra processed foods now. Like, everybody is talking about ultra processed foods. I mean, they've been around for a long time. It's not news. We've known that foods that are processed are not ideal for your body for a long time. I wrote a paper about various different things in the gut and the brain, and a lot of the thing was around ultra processed foods, and that was in 2018. It was one of the big things that I did for my doctoral degree. It was a review of 300 papers, and there was a lot going on already. So it's not like the theme of 2024. It has been growing in awareness for the last 10 years or so. But at the same time, I'm just thinking, it's just come to the point that it makes you feel guilty if you have a bag of Doritos, or, if you just fancy like if you haven't seen the full list of ingredients of something, or if you haven't made a dessert that doesn't just have 2 ingredients, because that's the new trend as well now on Instagram. Like, people, oh, this is a 2-ingredient bread that tastes completely mank when you make it, because it's like, it just doesn't have the substance to have everything that bread needs to have to be spongy and tasty. Just because you make it with chickpeas and something else, and you think, oh, that sounds like a great idea, and it looks great on a reel for 30 seconds. And when you make it, you think, oh my God, that's so dry, it's going to make me choke. So there is that kind of a hyper awareness of the ingredients, and that goes, in a way, it's tapping into what you were saying before, into that we don't eat nutrients, we don't just eat ingredients, we eat the whole spectrum of foods that needs to be a bit more varied. And is the experience of eating, it's the colors, is the not eating the same thing all the time, it's the diversities. It just gets lost. And also it taps into shame and guilt, that the flip side of that is I must purge it from my life because it's bad for me. So if you don't allow yourself to have the Krispy Kreme when you want it, you're more likely to then want to binge on it when you really want it. That's my
Absolutely.
experience.
Oh yeah, that's
And
absolutely my experience too, both personally and professionally as well. It's like, if it's not available, when it becomes available, and there is that, like you talk about, that guilt and shame. It's like, well, if I've had the one, sure, now I ruined it, I might as well have 5 more, even
yeah,
though I don't taste the other 4 or 3.5 or whatever. It's like, and now I'm feeling even worse because I ate all of them. So now I'm actually feeling a bit too stuffed and maybe a bit queasy, or so, like, then that just amplify the internalized shame of the self-imposed food rules as well. So it is kind of it is a tricky space to also bring nutrition into, like, nourishment, I feel sometimes. And like we talked about this before, that within clinical nutrition, sometimes we can forget about those other pieces, that it is back to nutrients, which is fine. But when the nutrients is, expanded out to food and how we eat, we have to bring in the relational aspect of it too, I think, because otherwise I feel like, are we missing a piece of health that is like, are we just leaving a piece of the health puzzle on the table if we don't do that? Thanks for listening. The Joyful Nourishment podcast is produced with no financial backing, and your support means a lot to keep this project going. If this episode has been helpful in any way, please consider liking, subscribing, or leaving a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on. This helps the podcast to be found by others. And of course, you can also forward this episode to a friend whom you think may benefit. Find out more about what I offer on straightforwardnutrition.com, and if you're interested in working with me, please use the link in the show notes to book in for a free initial 30-minute session. And finally, please come and join the Joyful Nourishment community over on Substack, unless you're there already, by subscribing to my newsletter using the link below.